because you're putting your lives at risk, and you're also putting other people's lives at risk who may need to rescue you. So just keep that in mind if you make the decision to stay beyond an evacuation order. Let's go up to John Zarella. John Zarella is about up in Cocoa Beach, just north of where we are right now. And John, you and I have been talking about that throughout the day, just following and heeding those evacuation orders. Up to you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And 3 o'clock this afternoon for the Barrier Islands in Brevard County, that evacuation order went into effect, giving people 24 hours to leave the Barrier Islands, go inland or wherever they are going to end up. The concern, of course, is, well, how many people are actually going to heed that warning? And you just don't know until it's all over. Now, one of the things you can see here is a lot of folks still coming down to the beach here at Cocoa Beach, checking it out, looking at the surf rolling in, and some of them that we've talked to have said, look, we're not leaving, we're staying, we're going to go ahead and ride this thing out. But two important things have come up this afternoon, Justin, from emergency management here in Brevard County. One, and let me show you the sand dunes over here. They're reporting that people are going down to the beach and they are taking the sand off the sand dunes to fill their sandbags. That is illegal. You cannot do that, folks. Please do not take the sand dunes. They are natural barriers to storms. Another thing that the folks are doing here, the emergency management is reporting, that here at the last minute, they're cutting tree limbs and they are leaving the tree limb debris in the street. It will not be picked up before the storm, which means it will become a projectile, a missile that will either hit your house or hit your neighbor's house. So do not go out at the last minute and start cutting tree branches. That is not a very, very wise thing to do, folks. Please pay attention to that. Don't do it. It's going to end up costing you more in the long run, or your neighbor. Maria, I'm sure that that's something that we all need to pay attention to and tell folks pretty stridently, look, that's not a smart thing to do, folks.
Absolutely. We're going to always reinforce that message. John Zarella, thank you so much. And, we also try and say, too, that whatever you've experienced before regarding hurricanes and preparation, you can't necessarily go on that guidance. So we are here to prepare you as best we can with the latest information. And here's what we know right now with Hurricane Irma. It's one of the last two flights out of Miami International Airport taking off now. And more than 600 flights have been canceled today, 75% of their schedule. And Georgia's governor has expanded the state of emergency. It now covers 94 of Georgia's counties. Florida's governor says millions of gallons of fuel have arrived at ports along the state's east and west coasts. Irma has claimed 17 lives in the islands. The U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary has issued a public health emergency in Florida. And for just the 5th time ever, Walt Disney World Resort will close early tomorrow night and will stay closed through at least Monday. Resort hotels remain open and are staffed with folks there taking care of those people there. All right, want to get some timing and impact specifics here. Miami, we'll start there. By Saturday morning, looking at those gusts picking up to about 40 miles per hour, really picking up as we get into Sunday morning, and 12 to 18 inches of rainfall, and that's. Sir, thank you so much for taking time with us. I know the rush is on, still preparations taking place. What can you tell us about the status of evacuations and how folks are reacting?
Well, the reaction of the community has actually been very good. We've been successful in getting the message out. You've been successful at the Weather Channel in getting the message out. People understand the intensity and the immensity of this storm. So we've been encouraging everybody to be off the Barrier Island tonight. We will be enforcing a curfew on the Barrier Island tomorrow. And we're trying to just get the word out that this is a serious storm. When you look at how big this is, how broad this is, and how potentially bad this is,
Oh, we apologize. We're having some audio difficulties there. That was the mayor of Fort Lauderdale, Jack Seiler, and talking about curfews being in place. That is to help the law enforcement as well as first responders do what they need to do to prepare as well. And that includes getting as many people out of the area, off the area roadways, and hopefully in places that they're going to be by tomorrow morning in order to hunker down for this storm. I want to, again, continue to talk about timing and impacts, because for so many there is still time to prepare, but for others really you're down to a few hours, especially when it comes to the weather impact, of course. Looking at the rainfall forecast, certainly a high impact part of this storm along with everything else, because 14 to 15 inches of rainfall in an area where we have, again, the forecast is through Monday, but for most of us that is going to be coming along in a relatively short period of time. So if you are even thinking about heading out on the roadways, running into some of those problems, obviously. All right, I believe we have the audio back with our mayor out of Fort Lauderdale, Jack Seiler. Sir, thank you again. Hopefully this is a much better situation here. But you were talking about some of the things in place, including that curfew. As far as anybody who might be sitting home watching and thinking about making that decision to evacuate, what are they looking at right now as far as timing and time frame? Are they running out of time?
Well, yeah, they are. Time is the evacuation. They need to get out tonight, get to higher and drier ground, get to a safer place. We want the barrier island cleared tomorrow. By tomorrow afternoon and evening, we'll be enforcing that curfew. But we have had our police out there the last 2 nights reminding people that they need to be off the barrier island come when the storm comes. So we've been pretty clear in our message.
And we've been talking about, too, the long lines for the gas shortages, the traffic. When it comes to the evacuations, really it's for the water rise, and that if people are thinking about evacuating, they don't necessarily have to go a far distance. What is the shelter situation? What are the options for people not that far off the barrier islands?
Well, you're absolutely right. They don't have to go far. Fort Lauderdale has a barrier island that runs the whole east side of the city. You just got to cross those causeway bridges. And as we've been telling people for 3-4 days, stay with friends, stay with family. We do have shelters available. We just opened up another shelter for owners with pets. But there is shelter space available. Most important thing is that I think people need to understand that this storm, and it's the storm surge, and you've been talking about it on the Weather Channel. The rain is one factor, the wind's another factor. My concern as the mayor is the storm surge. And when that comes across the barrier island, it's going to push a lot of water onto our low-lying areas, across the barrier island, and I think create potential flooding conditions. Not as long-term as we've seen in other places, but very powerful and very quick moving water.
And I know our Dr. Nab, too, was talking about how, isolation is life-threatening as well. So if people find themselves surrounded by water with no way out, that is obviously a problem. If we could talk a little bit about the infrastructure. You mentioned the bridges. Can people expect that those are going to close at a certain point in time?
Well, in fact, we closed those bridges down. We locked them down today at noon. So we let the marine community know, the marine industry know, and we have the largest marine industry in the country. At noon today, those bridges are not going to open again in terms of moving boats. So they moved quickly and responsibly. That worked out well. We locked them down in order to make sure that we can move our first responders, move people on and off as necessary, not as a recreational activity. So we are going to start tomorrow, like I said, enforcing ingress and egress, access to the barrier island, and with a very clear message that if you're not supposed to be there for a very important reason, we're going to have to take the necessary measures to restrict your access. Another element very important to us is post-storm, we don't want people out there that are trying to take advantage of those that have been disadvantaged by this storm. So we're going to be very clear. The only people out on the barrier island post-storm should be first responders, city officials, and part of our emergency response teams.
And so we have about a minute minute or so, and Fort Lauderdale, like many beautiful cities along Florida's coast, a destination for visitors. What's the message for people visiting, and how they can best get the latest information from your office?
Well, we've been out there with every possible message on social media, on television, on media. Messages out, but we're here for our visitors. We have hosted people for over 100 years. We're a world-class.
Good morning. Thank you for helping get the message out that, if you're in an evacuation zone,
continue to host people for 100 years after this. But while you're here, make smart choices, follow our orders and recommendations.
Got to get out. We care about your life. We all
coming back for years to come to enjoy our paradise.
All right. Fort Lauderdale Mayor Jack Seiler, thank you so much for taking time with us. An important message that in order to get everything squared away ahead of the storm, that's going to get everyone back as soon as possible. And that is so important to a city like Fort Lauderdale, counting on people doing just that, coming back. All right. Thank you so much, sir. We continue our coverage here on Hurricane Irma, including an update on the latest thinking as far as where Irma will go. And not just Florida, we'll look beyond into the southeast. As of the latest advisory, updated at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Max winds of 100. Mayor of Fort Lauderdale, Jack Seiler, and talking about curfews being in place, that is to help Taking a look at some dark, stormy clouds near Ponce Inlet, Florida, south of Daytona Beach, under that hurricane warning, but this is not related. Those stormy weather not related directly to Hurricane Irma, but nonetheless, with preparations underway along Florida's east coast and all of Florida, really, not what you need as you're trying to make those final preparations ahead of Hurricane Irma. Definitely ominous looking storm clouds. But really, everyone is preparing, hopefully, right now for Hurricane Irma's arrival. We're down to, in some areas, just a few more hours time before we really have to say, all right, we're going to hunker down and this is it. And that includes areas like Palm Beach, Florida, where we have our Justin Michaels reporting live for us. And Justin, I know for a lot of people who still may be trying to make that decision to stay or to go, there is still just a little bit more time.
You know what, Maria, not that much. You know, stores, let's talk about Publix, the southern grocery store chain. Publix is actually going to be closing all of its Palm Beach County locations at 8 o'clock tonight. So if there are still supplies you need, 8 o'clock tonight, at least for Publix, is the last time you'll be able to get them. So what time is it right now? About 7 o'clock, you have about an hour. You have about an hour to get to Publix to get the last few things you might need. Now take a look right now down the beach here, and I want to point out some beach erosion here. You can see the dunes here kind of protecting the beachfront homes and apartments and condominiums here in Palm Beach, but certainly plenty and very steep erosion. Hopefully these dunes will be what it takes to keep Irma away from people's homes and apartments. And looking beyond those dunes, you can see still tons of people on this beach, despite the fact that at 5 o'clock tonight, so about 2 hours ago, that's when the mandatory evacuation notices of Palm Beach went into effect, meaning everybody needs to get off this barrier island. This is a barrier island, and they went into effect at 5 o'clock, but on the beach right now, they're going to have to get off at some point because those mandatory evacuation orders are in place, and it's yet to be determined when they're going to be lifted. Further inland in West Palm Beach, we're talking about voluntary evacuation orders, and some people are heeding those, but still a tough go here. You know, it's a beautiful day, Brian, and a lot of people are like, hey, I wonder if it's going to hit. Is this thing actually going to hit here? We've gotten more questions about that. Hey, I hear it's moving west. It's not going to hit here, right? Well, I keep telling them it's a massive hurricane. It's a beast of a hurricane, and yes, they're going to feel effects of it here. And in fact, there are certainly going to be lots of problems here. But people are always looking optimistically, I think, and they were hoping that maybe it's not going to hit here. But Brian, I think you're here to tell us it certainly is.
Well, yeah, it's going to hit there in terms of hurricane force winds. Some fashion are definitely expected in the Palm Beaches and all along the East Coast. As a matter of fact, the hurricane force winds, the width of it with the storm is wider than the state of Florida. So unless something very unexpected happens, from coast to coast, from top to bottom, the peninsula, we're going to get hurricane force winds or hurricane force gusts. Now, the change today of the core of the hurricane being a little more likely to be on the west coast. I'm not saying absolutely, but likely to be much closer to the west coast does lower the upper limit if that track holds. But we're not 100% sure yet that that track is going to hold. Let's look at where the hurricane is right now. It's down to the south by Cuba, and it's moving almost due west here, right in the direction of the Cuban coast. Now, it actually has been forecast to come very close to the Cuban coast, but it's forecast to head up toward Florida with kind of a glancing blow. We'll see. That's one of the unknowns, is how is the hurricane's interaction with Cuba going to potentially affect its strength and track. From a different kind of satellite, this is called a microwave image, and this is looking down and measuring the radiation from different layers in the atmosphere. And this allows us to see the eye structure. And if you notice, now we're at the end of it. Well, let's go back to the beginning. Here we are at the beginning of it. Here's Hispaniola. See, there were two eyes. So the old eye, the little eye, died out, and the new eye built. So now we have one large eye, and what that's saying is the top winds may not be as high. You may have heard that the winds are down to 155, but the energy in the storm is just being spread out in a wider area, which just confirms that this is going to be a very large circulation when it comes up to the state of Florida. So it's doing what we kind of expect it to do. So the idea is, remember with the cone is only telling you where the center of the storm is expected to be. So if it follows up here and goes over the lower Keys and comes up near the west coast of the state, The storm, the hurricane force part of the storm, is something like that. Tropical storm force part of the storm is something like that. So it's much, much bigger than the peninsula of Florida. So when you look at the cone, don't think, oh, I'm almost out of the cone. That means I'm almost out of it. Nobody is going to be out of it here. The only question is, where is the absolute worst of it going to be? And that's going to be a band, maybe it's 75 miles wide, something like that, for the absolute worst of the storm. Okay, we have more than one storm to talk about. Here's Jose out here, and the problem with Jose is we're fearful for our friends here in the islands with a 150-mile-an-hour hurricane. First time ever to have two Category 4 hurricanes at the same time in the record book. It's going to just come very close to these islands that were so battered by Irma. So there are hurricane warnings up in several of the islands, including Anguilla and Barbuda, and even down here in Antigua, where it was just so bad, they have a hurricane watch. Also, Katia is over in the Gulf of Mexico as a Category 2. It's going to head into Mexico, into Veracruz State, and that will no doubt cause problems because of its interaction with the mountains here in Mexico. That's going to happen tomorrow. All right, lots more to talk about with Irma, including the extreme threat on the west coast of Florida. We'll have that for you as our coverage continues here on the Weather Channel in just a moment.
At FPL, we are preparing as if it is going to be a direct hit.
Stay away from down power lines. That's paramount.
We've got crews arriving today from Virginia and North Carolina, Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, and we'll have more crews coming in the days to come.
We will not stop until the lights are back on for every single customer.
We care about you and your safety just as we do our linemen and electricians who are out there performing this most dangerous work.
It's always a question.
And safety, #1 concern as a major hurricane barrels toward the United States. Hurricane Irma packing winds at 155 miles per hour, and we think at this point it's almost a certainty there are going to be huge impacts, if not a direct hit, on South Florida. May even intensify to become a Category 5 before landfall. Hurricane watches and warnings through Florida right now. Hurricane warnings from Sebastian Inlet south through the Keys. Storm surge warnings in effect as well, but also warnings across the Bahamas and then the north shore of Cuba as well. And yes, just about the entire state of Florida is squarely within the forecast cone. Thank you for staying with us for the Weather Channel's continuing coverage of Hurricane Irma. I'm meteorologist Mike Bettis in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where evacuations have been ongoing for days now. Here on the beach, there's not a soul out here anymore. A lot windier today than yesterday at this time. You can see the palms at this point are blowing in the wind. Very breezy today. Winds have been steady this evening, 15 to 20 miles per hour with a few gusts that are a little bit higher than that. And of course, the onshore flow of wind now, basically the wind's coming from the northeast at this point. The surf out there is a little bit rougher than it was yesterday. Actually, it was relatively calm yesterday. A lot of folks out there in the water yesterday. Not the case today. Mostly what we've seen out there is kite surfers today, and that's it. At times, even a few chances of some showers that came through today, but the big hit comes later tomorrow night into Sunday, but conditions from here on out stay very windy for us. Now, preparations have been ongoing for days here, and of course, just about everyone on A1A, where we are, has boarded up and evacuated. Everyone wants Irma to go away. And even folks that haven't completely finished still have a little bit of time to finish that up tonight and then get to their safe shelter tonight as conditions, especially through the day tomorrow, really begin to ramp up with the wind, and we expect the water to come up as well. Not just Fort Lauderdale, Miami doing the exact same thing. Everyone has boarded up, everyone anticipating a very serious hit from Hurricane Irma. This is a very large, very intense hurricane, and something we have not dealt with in South Florida in an incredibly long time. This is a different beast than other hurricanes we've had, from Andrew to Matthew. This one really means business. I want to let you know this, by the way, that a lot of the shelters are starting to fill up in Broward County, so please check their website, broward.org/ shelters.gov/hurricane. They'll let you know which shelters are at capacity, which ones can still take people, and which ones they're now opening also for pets. So keep that in mind. All right, let's get some more specifics on what this is going to do. Brian, a very breezy evening here in Fort Lauderdale. We know from this point forward, it only gets worse.
Yeah, we can see the clouds. I was just checking my camera from my house in Miami Beach, and you can see the clouds rotating around Hurricane Wilma. I almost said Wilma. Time flies. Hurricane Irma already affecting southeast Florida. All right, Mike, take a look at the latest numbers, and I was just checking on the Hurricane Hunter that's flying down through the storm, and no significant change. The pressure they're measuring is the same, and 155 or so miles per hour. We'll see what the analysis is with the update coming up in within the hour here from the National Hurricane Center. Moving to the west, and you can almost see a little bit of a wobble down perhaps toward the Cuban coast, and that puts a question mark on whether the Cuban land mass there might influence the circulation. But on the other hand, we've been talking about the Straits of Florida here are very, very warm, so there would be an opportunity to reorganize if that happened, but these things we can't predict with ultimate accuracy. You see the cone allows for the possibility of it moving over the Cuban coast, but one of the things that we have to be thinking about is if it does indeed take the left part of the cone, that puts even a bigger threat on the west part of the state. So the farther west this storm goes, the bigger the threat to the large population centers from Naples to Fort Myers to Sarasota to Tampa and on up the state. So we're just going to watch that very, very closely. There's apparent shift today of the likelihood of the storm affecting the west coast of the state is really daunting to think about, actually, just because that is such a vulnerable part of Florida. The idea here is that the storm approaches Florida as a Category 4 storm, makes landfall as a Category 4. You always allow for it to be one category higher, but a very, very strong storm is the point, and then loses the wind speed as it goes north, but still, you're going to get hurricane force gusts well up into North Florida if this is the schedule. And then in the southeast, this could be a significant windstorm and rainstorm for a good part of the southeast. It's actually much bigger than the cone, remember. And why are we more confident today? Well, we're a day earlier than we were, or a day later than we were yesterday. In other words, one day closer to it actually making landfall. That means weather forecasts are better. And look at the models, the European and the GFS model, both indicate that this is where the storm is going. Sometimes they can both be wrong, and sometimes they can both shift back. But the fact that these models are bringing the storm into the lower Keys and then on up toward those population centers in southwest Florida and very close to Tampa, and also Orlando would be very windy, threateningly windy in Orlando. That gives us confidence that that may indeed be what happens. Add to that other models. Now, the one that's called the AVNI, that is the GFS right there. But look at these other models, all toward the lower Keys and the west coast. So that increases our confidence. Again, we don't want anybody on the east coast of Florida thinking, okay, it's not for me. It just might not be the ultimate for the East Coast, but we're not absolutely sure about that until we actually see this turn. In terms of when should preparations be ready, time to be ready, here you see South Florida here and the Keys tomorrow morning. So tonight is it. This is it. You get where you're going to be tonight, and you can sleep in your bed tonight, and then tomorrow morning, just be ready for the winds to increase. Then a little farther north in the evening, Sunday morning here across the I-4 corridor, plus or minus, and that means you have another day up here in Central Florida to get yourself ready. Another way to look at it, though, that's for the wind. Also, you have to get ready for the surge. So here we go. This is where the core of the hurricane is on the European model, which is basically the Hurricane Center's center of the cone. And you see that it's in the vicinity of Naples and Fort Myers here Sunday at 7 p.m. All day Sunday, the storm surge is piling up on the southeast coast starting in the morning on Sunday. But we'll look what happens later in the day on Sunday. All day, the rest of the day into Monday, the Gulf is piling up from Tampa south. It piled up more down to the south because the winds were stronger, but that's why there is such a significant storm surge threat here on the southwest coast. And that is, as we all know, the storm surge is the deadliest part of the hurricane. All right, Mike, we've talked a lot about storm surge. We haven't talked about rain, and this is such a big storm that flooding rain could be a problem as well. Back to you in Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, we even talked to some folks yesterday, Brian, who were saying, we're sandbagging our garage doors because just a regular, afternoon thunderstorm in the summertime floods our place. We're dreading what could come with a foot of rain out of Hurricane Irma. So, so many things to consider, so many different atmospheric components coming together. And by the way, so many people taking this very, very seriously. There are actually lines to get into shelters in Miami-Dade County. It's amazing to see how many people are taking this seriously, knowing that their lives could be at risk, knowing that they could be in a vulnerable location for storm surge or wind, and they're saying, I've got to get out of here and I've got to get to someplace safe. Many shelters are now filling up. There are numerous shelters in Miami-Dade and Broward County that are at capacity right now. And so go to their websites. They both have excellent websites where you can go on there. They even have apps, or you can call 311, any of those ways, and you can figure out what shelter is closest to you that is open, because some of them won't be able to take any more people because they're at capacity at this point and they just can't overcrowd some of those shelters. All right, let's talk more about where this could be headed along the West Coast. Paul Goodloe is in Naples this evening. Paul, we live and die by these models. We live and die by these forecast cones. And it just seems that over the last 24 hours, just ticking a little bit farther west and a little bit farther west and a little bit farther west. And now Naples could be potentially a direct hit.
And people's blood pressure going up and higher and higher and higher because of that, Mike. Yeah, they started a couple of days ago thinking, oh, we feel sorry for our friends in eastern Florida. But now, I think the shift has been out here. People now are concerned about their own well-being because of that shift. You mentioned some of the shelters. We're under a mandatory evacuation on this part of Collier County. And by the way, 2 of the shelters already at capacity. It does not mean they will turn you away. They will find a place for you to go if you evacuate to either Lee or Collier County. And Collier County is where Naples is right now. And by the way, if you're basically if you're west or south of US 41, that's the evacuation zone, and also all the barrier islands across this area. In fact, Marco Island, where we were 2 days ago under mandatory evacuations, that place could be underwater. You see the Gulf next to me here, and I looked at the high water line here. You add the storm surge to that, we're talking where I'm standing could be under another perhaps maybe 6 feet of water. And that means all that water coming into the first, maybe even threatening the second story of this hotel that we're standing next to right now. So it's a big concern. Take a look at the storm surge forecast. It is that very vulnerable southwest corner of Florida, which could see the highest storm surge with Hurricane Irma, 6 to 12 feet here. And again, 6 to 12 feet would bring that water probably even over this little glass wall and definitely into the pool and into the first floor, maybe even threatening the second floor. We were under a hurricane watch last night. Now we have a hurricane warning as well as a storm surge warning as well, meaning we should experience hurricane conditions and a possible storm surge with that within the next 36 hours. So basically, yesterday evening we had a lot of thunderstorms across the area, kind of delaying preparations. This afternoon we have some showers as well. It is dry currently, so your time is running out. As we head on towards daybreak tomorrow, you might have another 2 or 4 hours before we start seeing the winds pick up and the weather going downhill as the sun goes lower in the sky on your Saturday. And then again, the closest approach, maybe even a direct hit as we head on towards your Sunday midday into the evening hours. But here's the thing. And we keep driving this home no matter where you are here in Irma's path, is Irma is not a point. Don't get caught up in just where that center point is going. Irma is a huge hurricane with huge impacts. And on top of that, there's a possibility it could strengthen back to a Category 5 before making landfall. And these things do not have brakes. They basically slowly wind down over land or over cold water. There's no cold water to kind of cut it off. It is just going to be land that's going to slow this thing down as it comes on shore, and all the impacts, all the energy starts to wind down with it as well. So if you're in Tampa, just because you're not under a storm surge warning or under a hurricane warning right now, you're not off the hook. All this plays northward into the state, as well as we're talking about into Georgia, into the Carolinas as well. But right now, we are seriously concerned here in Southwest Florida for a possible direct hit. And again, people who remember Hurricane Charlie, Hurricane Wilma, it could be like that, except those impacts over a much broader area, because this is a much bigger and possibly stronger hurricane to approach this area as we head on towards Sunday. Maria?
All right, Paul Goodlow, thank you so much for that information. And again, it's always that contrast of these beautiful conditions right now and knowing what's ahead. All right, let's give you what we know right now. All Publix grocery store locations in the Miami-Dade and Broward County areas will close an hour from now. Broward County now on record. Schools are closed Monday, and they will stay closed until further notice. Tampa Bay is now under a storm surge watch. The Port of Miami will close at 8 tomorrow morning. Next week's series between Tampa Bay and the New York Yankees will be played at Citi Field in New York, and New Jersey's governor has okayed Irma assistance for South Carolina. And continuing to look at the details, get the timing and the impacts down for as many cities as we can. We'll take a look at Fort Myers. Again, really seeing the destructive part of the wind story here as early as Sunday, but really Saturday evening, those winds will start to uptick 8 to 12 inches of rainfall. But there is the big concern, as Paul was talking about, up to 12 feet of storm surge. Again, a rise of water above what is normally dry ground. And as we mentioned, that storm surge watch now in effect for the Tampa Bay area. Also a lot of heavy rain in that forecast, 9 to 10 inches likely across that area through Monday. Again, a lot of that will be coming rather quickly as that storm begins to move over that region. And again, Tampa up to 5 feet of storm surge may not sound like a lot, but in that area it is potentially very significant. All right, send it back to Mike Bettis there in Fort Lauderdale. Mike.
All right, thank you very much, Maria. We have huge concerns here across South Florida, as many people, millions in fact, could be impacted by a major hurricane come tomorrow night into Sunday. Everything you need to know right here on the Weather Channel. Our crew spread out across the South to bring you coverage, as we know that for many of you, what's happening right now is just a taste of what's to come.